As entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we chose to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture those stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. Marianne Hickman is a certified breakthrough coach, international public speaker, and personal mentor who specializes in inspiring women, and a few brave men, to monetize their message through appearing on stages. Marianne has been featured on 2002 different worldwide stages, focusing on enriching and cultivating development of self, message, and revenue. Her life's motto is to, quote, make good people crazy wealthy. Marianne was a single mother who brought her family from food stamps to a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio and a multiple six-figure income. She is married to her best friend, Richard Hickman, and together they are raising 6 children. Oh, Marianne, wonderful to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for being here. Truly, truly appreciate you for it.
I'm honored, Andrew. Like, ever since the day I met you, I was like, this guy is up to cool things. I want to be part of his universe. So
It's like, a friend of mine, Kelly, says it's like, doing cool stuff with your friends, and that's how we do business. So that's how I love doing it. It's just
the best
good
way
to
to
do
do
cool
it.
stuff. Yeah.
Absolute best way to do it.
Awesome. So what's the cool stuff that you're really good at?
Oh
What's
gosh.
your gig?
Well, professionally, I always like to lead with what's most important to me, motherhood. That's a huge thing for me. I'm a mom of 6, and that's my whole world. Everything falls in around that. Professionally, I'm a public speaker trainer. And I teach coaches, I teach industry experts, I teach business owners how to show up on stage, deliver their signature presentation. They get leads from that. And then every little bit of other piece of time is filled in with my little hobby farm and working in my garden boxes, raising chickens. I was up at 5 o'clock this morning, moving chickens into the coop, and it's just a beautiful recipe for me.
You're the second person I know that has like a farm, and it's sort of interesting that I don't know if you have goats or not, but she does. And whenever I have
Working
to
on
ask,
it.
you're working on it. Okay.
Oh
So
yeah.
whenever I ask her about, how are her kids, I have to define which ones, either the 5 sons she has or her kids, the goats.
That's too funny. That's funny because on social right now, I'm actually on this growth phase. I'm taking the month of June to not promote my products or push them. If people ask, of course, they're still available, but really it's a growth month for me. And my husband said, if you can get to 10K this month in followers, I'll buy you a goat. And I was like, deal, done. But you have to buy me 2 because they're social animals, and one will like be really loud and obnoxious, and we'll get the city called on us.
Yes, exactly. You got to get the pairs. Yes. I would say something about that not being a bad deal, but
There it is.
dad jokes are my gift to the world.
I love it.
So now what got you into farming? I kind of want to
Oh
explore this for a second. Like what made you want to go out and buy chickens and goats and kids and stuff?
dude, it just seems so primal.
Huh.
I just okay. So I was thinking about this. I was moving mulch from my trailer to my garden boxes the other day. I never knew my grandfather. My mother's father, died in the 1960s. So before she got married and had kids, he passed away. And my mom told me stories about how she was raised over in Taylorsville, and my dad would, or my her not, excuse me, not my dad, her dad would break horses, and he would ride through the house with them when he broke a new horse. And my grandmother would get all mad about it, but he used to raise chickens, the big coops with like 30,000 chickens in them and all this stuff. And I'm learning more and more about my grandfather, and my grandmother on my dad's side used to love her raspberry bushes, and I grew up with all these things outdoors. And part of me, it feels like it's part of my DNA. And
Mm.
I don't have a huge farm. My heart tells me I do, but my acreage doesn't. But so there's this primal part of me that is like, I feel like it's in my blood in a way. But then there's this other part of me is that it's really ticked off at what the getting back to our roots has become. If we were to lose electricity, most of the United States would not be able to fend for ourselves. And I'm over here like, okay, let's grow our own vegetables. Let's, fend for ourselves, not only in supply, but also in quality. I'm kind of ticked off at all the GMOs and all the crap that's in our food and how sick it makes us and how we tolerate it. And I could go into the whole conspiracy with big pharma and how they're poisoning us, but I won't. But that's part of it too, is just how off grid and self reliant can I get? And that's really what just wakes me up at 5 in the morning.
Mhm. And I think that's a huge movement that I'm a part of as well, where I mean, I don't have it right now, but that's one of my long-term goals is to have a large parcel of land where I can go out and do it. I've made my own sausage, I make my own bacon. I've done all of these things where I want to be able to be 100% in control of my life. And like you said, there's so much junk in our food. We just don't know where anything is coming from. We don't, there's labeling laws that are out there, but they're really they jack around with them.
They're
They really do,
terrible.
and you never quite know exactly what's there, and you never quite know what's in your food. So I want to know what's in my food, and I did keto for a long time, and for me that was difficult to try to find food that fell within those criteria because you have to have very high quality food to do it, especially with the amount of fat that you're eating. You really have to have high quality. And a lot of the fat we have is very low quality. So
Oh
I
yeah, garbage.
100% get it, that this is now, it's a thing. I feel better when I'm on food that I've made myself, that I know where it's from and it's organic and I can trace it. And,
Yep.
I notice a difference. I notice
Oh,
wheat's a big one for me. I'm not gluten intolerant, but just some of the wheat that we have, I have trouble with wheat and it's
well, and that's because they
non-organic.
changed it.
Yeah.
But, our food that you buy at the grocery store is made for storage, not made for nutrition.
Yes.
Because if the food goes bad between the farm and the store, everybody loses money, and that's no
Mhm.
good.
Mhm.
So they make these genetically engineered things to be pretty and to last through. A tomato shouldn't be able to withstand a truck ride.
Mhm.
It shouldn't. If you ever grown a tomato in your yard, you can barely bring in the door before it falls apart. And I'm like, that's what I want. I want food that's made for nutrition, for nutrients, for macronutrients, for minerals, not something that's supposed to withstand a truck ride.
Yeah, something that's more nutrient dense. And I
Yep.
think that's something that we really get with the stuff that we've made ourselves. So absolutely. Now I'm writing that for you. That's a larger, I had somebody, it was Sean Whalen years ago, or sorry, not that long ago. Sorry, not years ago. He just bought a huge property out in the middle of nowhere. And I think it's 470 something acres. And he said, and I'm now going to start using this as my judgment of my measuring distances. There's only one gun that I own that I can fire that can hit the other side. And I kind of want something that big.
Awesome.
So those are
Well,
my
it's
goals.
really trendy right now. You're seeing it all over TikTok and Instagram. All these people getting their not just hobby farms, but big farms. I think Pace has his.
Yeah.
I need to get with
Yeah.
back with him, and he's like, you should come over. I'm like, okay, I'm down. Let's go.
Let's do this.
And I also saw was it Ty Lopez that just got a big, huge farm, and he's doing a lot of his posts from out in the fields and stuff,
Oh,
and it's
nice.
I'm kind of
Yeah.
excited for that to be the new trend,
Yeah.
that because I think it's always good for us and it teaches the value of hard work. Like I said, 6 kids, I'd rather have them outside. Our rule in our family is that you have before you get to do anything, the screen times or blah blah blah, you have to spend a half an hour in the yard doing yard work. You have to go do 2 miles, whether it's on the treadmill or on the outside track, and you have to have that done before you can do anything else. And it's really cool to watch them take responsibility for these garden boxes. It's a low risk thing. But I talked to my son who's 11, and I was like, "Bro, have you planted anything?" And he's like, no." And I was like, "Well, what if that was your only source of food? You'd be up a creek right now." And he's like, "Oh crap." So he starts planting stuff and watering it right away. He'll be behind the season, but and maybe I'm behind the season getting him started on this. I could have started way younger, but we're starting now, and it's catching. We've been made into snowflakes who are way too comfortable, and it's way too easy. It's a blessing and a curse. It's way too easy to be successful in a way, and I know that is hard to say, but think about it. We have our phones, we have the whole world literally at our fingertips, and we've gotten so soft, and it's going to bite us if we're not careful.
Yeah. And what would happen if something went wrong, and it's not really negative thinking, it's just more I want to be in control. And if my food supply stopped, I want to know what the hell to do. You
Yeah.
know, if my electricity stopped, I want to know what to do. I want to
Yep.
be able to, it's not going to be the same quality of living, but I agree with you. It's just we've become so comfortable. And as entrepreneurs, we know comfort is not a good thing. We're always in this constant state of discomfort because we're constantly pushing forward, because we're constantly being self-reliant. And I think that's really important that people can, I think as entrepreneurs, we need to lead by example, and we need to lead people into this direction where it's like maybe not being maybe being uncomfortable a little bit to whatever
Yeah.
your level is. Maybe being uncomfortable a bit is not a bad idea.
I can't remember. I think it was you and I that were talking about this, about the entrepreneur's stress level.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, yeah. Like our baseline is
Yeah.
everyone else's panic.
Yes.
That's how
Yep.
we show up.
Absolutely. And it's true because we're so used to things going wrong. I mean, it's like I want entrepreneurs in charge of things, really honestly, because we're just like, oh, that sucked. Okay, let's go through something else.
Oh well.
That's all we feel. That's it. We're used to that different level. And I think it's, there's this very special place for that. And I think it's something that's really necessary. I think we can also teach other people how to, even though, our stress level is here and theirs might be here. If we get it here on someone, we can make their life slightly better just by showing them you can do this. Because there's
Hmm.
a liberation about being able to know I don't have to worry about my next paycheck or being laid off or whatever happens because I'm just going to make it work. Right. And so I think there's a liberation in that. And there's something that makes that a whole lot makes it easier. It makes our lives easier in general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. My husband and I were just talking about this because we run and own, roan, that's a new word. We run
Run.
and own several businesses. And we were just talking in the car 2 days ago. And it was all about faith in what we're doing and faith in each other. And we
Mhm.
really got it wasn't really a debate, but it was one of those hard conversations about um what does faith in each other really mean? What does it boil down to? Where can we lean into each other's strengths and trust each other even when the other person drops the ball? This was such a powerful conversation for me. And you and I both have been in the coaching world for a really long time, and so we understand these principles, but we still get to have our aha moments, right? We still get to have our breakthroughs. And I was driving actually no, I was doing a leg press at the gym. It really cemented with my quads. I was working on that. But I had the thought, how would I show up differently if we were already at our goal?
Hmm.
How would I behave differently? How would I make decisions differently? And I started to make decisions way differently. And on the surface, you probably can't tell, but my inner level of peace compared to panic was greatly reduced. My peace went through the roof because I was like, I'm acting as if we've already achieved this goal. We've got a couple businesses and some are more successful than others. And I thought, what would it be like if all of them were pumping out 6 figures a month? What would I be doing with my time? How would I interact with my children differently? How much easier would it be to make my next Instagram reel if I was acting as if it was already working? And I could feel it in my blood, dude. Like I could feel the energy just going. I got goosebumps right now just thinking about it. I could feel the energy of it just relaxing me, and everything became so much more fun because I didn't have to worry about, are we going to arrive? Because in my mind we already had.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that's one of the things I like the best about being an entrepreneur is knowing I can.
Yeah.
And you're right, there is a sense of peace to it. I'm not beholden to anyone else. If something goes wrong and these things hit the fan and something goes wrong, I understand that I have the ability. And as entrepreneurs, we have the ability to say, okay, great, we pivot. Now we're going to do something about it. And
Yep.
you're right. There's such a sense of peace about that, that no matter what happens, well, except maybe like, nuclear bomb dropping, but there's not really a whole lot else we can do about it. So we
I was
just kind
gonna
of have
say
to
if that
deal.
happens, we're still at peace because we're all gone anyway. So
Basically, yeah. So there's a sense of peace around knowing that there's nothing. I don't know what I'm
yeah,
going to do with this. But yeah, I think there is that sense of peace, and that's why for me, one of my main life goals is to show people that they can get out of their 9 to 5, and that's where this podcast comes from. Is I hope that by these stories, I can show people that there's a reason why, my intro says there's a reason why we left our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
so
Because really
true.
that's what we've done. But it's a different level of work. Going to work for somebody else is great. I'm punching a clock by 5:02, I'm done. I give that
Yep.
1 minute extra, yeah.
Right.
But and then we take my 2 weeks of PTO and we're good. We have a passion. We have something that we're working towards. We have something that we're doing. And so I think for us, that passion really drives us. That passion really gives us this sense of fulfillment and a sense of peace. So yeah,
Yeah.
kind
Well,
of
and I
fun.
heard from another. I wish I could credit who told me this,
Oh,
but I was watching a podcast and they said that some entrepreneurs should be employees and some employees should be entrepreneurs. It is not for everybody. It is for those who are called. And the entrepreneur that is okay with the safety net of going back to a job probably should be an employee, and you're probably better off. entrepreneurs need employees. Where do you think the jobs come from? They came from an entrepreneur creating the business and creating the job. And for some people, being the employee is their lane, it's their groove, it's their calling, they're good at it. And entrepreneurs, we need people we can rely on that are like that. But if you're an employee and you're supposed to be an entrepreneur, then you will have a breaking point. I had a breaking point. Oh my gosh, when I separated from my job, it was this one of the scariest things I've ever done. I clawed for that job. I clawed to maintain it. I shouldn't have, but I did. But when we eventually separated and I thought, okay, I'm out on my own, I got into my car and I left my office behind. I'd emptied out the proverbial cardboard box. Took me a couple trips, but I got it emptied. I'm sitting in my car. And this noise escaped from my lungs and through my mouth before I had even realized it. It was this, it wasn't, it was this expression of relief and joy and excitement to say, I'm finally going to be using my building blocks, my Legos, my materials to build my own empire instead of using my materials to build someone else's. And I have to say, I was grateful for that position. I learned so much, but it took me longer than I believe it should have in a way to step out on my own and say, there are people that are waiting to knock on my door that can't find it because I haven't built it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that moment. So for me, no, you're the first to hear this story, by the way. So this is
Oh,
like a whole breaking thing for you. I've been out of the corporate world for 11 years. I had a decent job. I was a corporate trainer for a large call center company. I was in global operations. So when we had a new client, brought them on, worked with a bunch of great companies. And it was funny. It was April 2013. And I can remember having the meeting with my boss and me, my boss's boss, and I'd known both of them. So I worked with them for years, and then HR. And they
oh,
told me they laid off, told me you're being laid off. And here's all of the benefits you get. And by the end of it, the HR lady's like, you are really calm about this. Normally this doesn't go well. Normally people get all up to date. And I was just very pragmatic about it, going, okay, all right, cool. This is what we're going to do. Is it? Because for me, I knew I was done. I knew I was at that breaking point. And so it was a few years later that I started my companies. And so it was one of those things where, I know that moment where you're like, this is not for me. I'm a square peg in a round hole.
mm-hmm.
This isn't fitting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I will say this, that you had way more peace than I did. I fought it. Oh my gosh, I fought it tooth and nail. I went through all the gamut of emotion. I made it this long, drawn out process. And when really it should have, I won't shoot on myself because I learned a lot from that.
Mhm.
It could have been a better hearkening to God and saying, hey, guess what? I'm not going to make you bulldoze me. I'll go. But he had to bulldoze me. And I'm glad he did. As hard as it was, I'm glad he did. And the day I embraced it and stopped fighting it, oh my gosh, Andrew, like the people that have come out of the woodwork, not only in ability to serve and show up for people that needed me to show up in the world, just like people need the listeners to show up in the world, but the ability to connect with people like you and people like Sean and people like Dan Young and people like Maya Nicole, like in the first several weeks and months of really saying, this is my company now, it was almost as if people were, I know this sounds like woo woo and weird, but it was almost as if people were waiting, literally waiting. Like I had questions come in and I just messaged a friend of mine yesterday and I was like, hey, we should do a podcast swap. And she's like, that sounds great. Are you still working for this other company? And so many times, Andrew, people are like, are you still working for this other company? And every time I say no, they're like, great, let's get it scheduled. And I'm just thinking like, were you waiting for me to leave? What?
Yeah.
Guys, if you're listening to this and you have felt the bug of entrepreneurship bite you, first of all, self check, make sure that you're not an employee destined to be an employee. Make sure you mean it and then embrace it. Don't wait for the steamroller to push you. It's the suckier of the two roads.
You call it the steamroller. I call it the 2x4 of consciousness, the 2x4 of reality.
Yeah, leave the
Yeah.
mark.
I've been hit by it a lot. So at that one point, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, cool. And then I screwed up every possible way you can repeatedly.
Oh
So
my gosh.
call them my learning moments, but yeah, if there's a way to do it wrong, I have done it wrong.
Dude, that tuition gets expensive, but it's very valuable.
But the funny thing now is I was, there was a time there. I've done a lot of self work over the past like 4 or 5 years on myself. And it's funny that when you're looking back at all of the stupid shit you pulled, I'm looking at it going, but now I am more capable to help somebody in that same situation because I've been there. It's
Big
like
time.
Drew, what's his name, the Fit to Fat to Fit guy, where he's like, I needed to learn what people were because I was always a fitness person. I was always in shape. So he gained 60 pounds, did all of the wrong things because he needed to be able to learn what the people that he was helping went through. And same thing, I needed to learn those lessons and do everything the wrong way so I could say, look, bro, I totally know what you're doing right now. Here's exactly how I screwed it up, and I'm going to help you move forward.
Big time. Big time. About 15 years ago, I was in a therapist's office it was my ex-husband and I. We were in the therapist's office for treatment and just getting some help with one particular struggle. And the therapist, I pulled him aside and I said, have you ever conquered this particular problem? And they told me no. And I said, if you've never struggled with this, then how do you expect to help anybody? And my confidence in that therapist eroded to nothing. I was like, you've never battled this. And he's like, well, isn't there something to be said about someone who's just lived without it their entire life? So I was like, no, because that's not who you're working with. You're working with people who need to climb out of a hole and you don't even know how to make a ladder.
One of my favorite people is Gregory. He started Secret Knock. I actually just had him on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he has this concept of opinion versus counsel, where opinion is I've not done it, but I've heard about it. I'm book smart on it. They might get some good, you might get some good information from opinion, but no, I want counsel. I've been there. I've done that. I've screwed up in these ways, and now I'm going to show you how I got through it. And I think it's 100% correct. There's something that you can get something out of opinion, but I want somebody who's been through some shit.
Yeah, I like
because
it.
I've been through some, and I want to make sure that that person is qualified to do it. You've actually done it, right?
Yeah. What do you do when you're face to face with it? That I love that. I'm going to steal that and use it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I stole it from Greg, so you're good.
Hey, Greg. If I remember your name, I'm going to make sure I attribute it to you. Thank you, Greg.
Absolutely. I'll text you later. We'll make sure you. So I want to go back to your ninja skill because you are a really good speaker trainer, and how did this come about? Like, how did you get to that point? What was the story behind that?
I have to thank Mrs. Wilson. This is my 7th grade English teacher, and she also taught drama. She was an incredible woman. She was so refined. She was the woman that you'd imagine everyone's grandma is, with the perfectly coiffed hair and the wool like jacket and beautiful pencil skirt. Like, she was straight out of like England, transplanted to the US without the accent, but with all the refinement. She was incredible. And she challenged me one day. She said, I really think you should do this optimist speech contest. And I was like, what on earth is an optimist speech contest? And I was already taking drama with her, and she didn't know it, but she was one of my mentors. Probably my first mentor other than my mom and dad. And so Miss Wilson put me in this optimist speech contest. I wrote a speech on optimism, and I started delivering the speech when I was 12. I ended up winning the competition, and I went to regionals and watched these other kids compete. And I remember, and this is going to sound weird, but I remember judging them, not condemning. That's different. I wasn't condemning, but I was analyzing, and I was like, oh, would I do that? I liked how they did that. Would I do that? And I started to not only absorb the content from an audience perspective, but I also backstage in my brain saying, what would I do if I were backstage and I was this person? I didn't win the state, but I missed my sister's wedding to compete. I don't know if we've ever patched that up yet. It's really started on this road. Now, this was probably, gosh, I'm 38 right now. So I was 12. That's 26 years ago. Influencer wasn't a thing. The internet was barely a thing back then. So there wasn't a job description called influencer. I think Tony Robbins was just in the beginning decades of his career. So coaching was pretty new to the world. Now it's kind of overdone. I don't even like to use the word coach anymore. It's also starting to get regulated, but it really started me on this path. When I really think about my first presentation, I was 5 years old in my church. My church does this great thing where it puts kids on stage in front of podiums and they have to give a 2-minute talk. And it's the coolest thing ever, because everything that we do is communication. Even if you're not a public speaker, Everything that we do boils down to how well we communicate with our spouses, with our kids, with our employers, with our employees, everything. And the master communicators take it to the stage. And when you take your skills and your communication to the stage, everything grows. Everything grows. If you're honing in on your business and you're taking that to the stage, your stage will grow it. If you're honing in on what sucks in your life and you want to make more suck, you want to vent about it on Instagram, take the stage. Guess what? The suck will grow. Whatever you focus on will grow. Most people use the stage, at least if you're a business owner, to grow their business, to grow their companies, to get their message out there. And you and I both know that we've seen the stage be misused in many ways. There's a lot of things that are growing that we don't like, but it's just because the stage is a neutral tool. So when I was 12 years old, I really got started there. Later on, fast forward to my, mid to late 20s, I was a seminar junkie. I love seminars. I still do. I go to as many as I can. Even if I'm not speaking, I just want to be like backstage, front stage, taking notes, absorbing everything. Now, what happened was the speaker was supposed to have a co-host at the next event. Now, the co-host was going out of town. And so the speaker went to the back of the room and he grabbed a few of his friends and he's like, hey, come outside with me. I want to see if you can help me out with the next event. And he was kind of vetting to see if he could have some people take the place of the co-host. I wasn't invited. I was not one of those people, but I went anyway because I didn't want to miss the opportunity. And I remember we were in the foyer of the event center, just in our chairs. And he's like, get up and show me what you got for 2 minutes. And I got up and I did. And I got to co-host the next event. I emceed the next event. And within 3 months, I was teaching a $25,000 public speaker course where we would meet for 4 hours every Wednesday and do the pressure cooker of your signature presentation. And we made our first group of graduates from that. I'll never forget the first woman that took our training and then did her first event and made $19,000 at her first event. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. In fact, I messaged her last week to see how she was doing because it just is such a cool story. I've had several graduates from that go on and take more stages and do more business and grow that. But that was really the thing that told me we have something here. This is repeatable, it's sustainable, and the stage will never go away. Even when COVID crashed all live events, the stage never went away. It just went digital. And that's when so many influencers were born. And so that's why I do what I do, is because there's so many businesses that deserve to be seen. There's so many entrepreneurs whose dreams are worthy and they just need to learn how to communicate it.
And then going back to what we were saying about having, opinion versus counsel, I want so many people with counsel up on stage telling me how they screwed up and what they did wrong and how they corrected that as well. That's something for me, because we're in similar spaces, and that's something for me that is my passion. And what I do, why I do what I do, is I want to make very sure, because that one person that's sitting in the back of the room that's having a really rough time and they're in the suck and it's just not working, and they hear that speaker, and that speaker's like, look, dude, I've been there. And here's how I got out of it. And that's that one moment that helps, that one core memory, that one core moment that helps change them to be able to go out and be the badass they're supposed to be. And I think that's, that it's obviously you're very passionate about this too, about it. But for me, it's a duty, it's a calling to do it. I love
my
that.
Goosebumps are just going crazy right now, just listening to you say that. Like I'm working with someone right now that's going to be speaking at WealthCon it's in July. It's in just a couple of weeks. And we're working on his story right now. And what's crazy, and you know this, Andrew, what's crazy is that your most impactful stories aren't always the ones that were most traumatic. It's usually those mundane moments that creates such a huge impact. The gentleman I'm working with right now, we're trying to hone in on the correct story and the correct sequence that we should be telling at this event. And he had this really, traumatic story that's probably rare among most people. He went to the DMV and realized his last name wasn't really his last name, and that his whole family was different than what he thought it was. For the better, but a surprise nevertheless. And I thought, well, okay, that's really cool. That's really significant. And he's like, but I don't think that's the one. And I was like, tell me what you mean. And he said, I really think the moment that changed everything for me was when I was in a garage and hanging out with my buddies. And I was the only one in a suit and tie, and they were all in their sweats, and it smelled like drugs and all this stuff. And I realized I was surrounded by the wrong people. And I was like, dude, that's your story. That's your moment, because everyone in the audience can relate to sitting in a room and feeling out of place. Not everyone can relate to going to the DMV and realizing your family's not what you thought it was. But everyone can relate to looking around them. And if they can't, they should, and be able to in that moment. look around them and say, am I the biggest fish in this pond? And should I be swimming in a different one? And you're right. The storytelling is everything. And every great speaker, you, me, and everyone that we've heard, Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, whoever, they have this moment where the mindset shifts and they said, I need to be asking different questions. And those are the most powerful moments to share.
I remember with one of my clients, this was one of the first ones I had years ago, did not want to say that his dad was an alcoholic. And this is not an unusual thing. It wasn't like some big, this is somewhat common. It's not something that's really,
It's
shameful.
very
It's not
common.
something, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But it's funny. That is the one thing. And so I urge him, I'm like, no, you need to tell this story. This is going to attach to people. People are going to latch onto this, and this is going to help more people. And it has. I think sometimes there's those little things, and this is something that I like to push my clients with really heavily is vulnerability.
Yes.
Be vulnerable, because those vulnerable moments are those moments that are going to physiologically, there's something that happens when you're giving a vulnerable personal story on stage. Your brainwaves sync with the audience,
Mm-hmm.
and you create this sort of mastermind situation that goes on. If you ever heard a really good speaker like Ed Milet, and you're vibing with them and you're just in that moment, and there could be World War III going on outside and you wouldn't notice it because you're in sync with them. But the other part is that's what really attaches, that's what makes you the person that people want to follow and want to hear. And that's what makes the most meaningful impact, because we're wired to learn emotionally. So anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's knowledge to that psychology that I will tell you that you've probably seen this too, that some people use that maliciously. It's really quite terrifying when someone understands the way the brain works and the way the hive mentality works and the way vulnerability works, and they use it maliciously without any level of authenticity, or with a very small level of authenticity. And I watch rooms move when that happens, and then I watch that same body of people deteriorate within a year, maybe two, when they realize that what was said from the front of the room, or how it was said from the front of the room, didn't have the substance. It caused movement, but it didn't have the substance. So when I'm training people, it is critical for me to first of all see the authenticity. First of all, judge and second of all, judge the authenticity to make sure it's really authentic. And honestly, if I ever, and I've never had this happen yet, but if I were ever to detect a snake among my student population, I'd kick him to the curb so fast, because we can't have that at all.
We have to use it for the power of good only. Yeah.
Yep.
And you're right. There are ways to manipulate, and it's not hard.
Yeah.
It's nothing that's terribly difficult to do. And there are some people that are very, very good at it. But like you said, authenticity will weed them out.
Mm-hmm.
You could tell when somebody's being inauthentic. You got the BS meter.
Yeah.
Something
It's a
doesn't
very
quite seem
expensive
right.
meter. Yeah, I paid a high price to get that meter.
Yeah, I can imagine. So this has been so much fun. It's already been 30 minutes, and I can't believe it's been, it seems like it's been a lot less than that. But I always ask guests one thing at the end. I got this from the Bigger Pockets podcast, and it's how I first learned about Rich Dad, Poor Dad many, 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 many years ago. What is one book or podcast that has significantly impacted your life?
Oh, this is such a great question. I have a whole library of books that I'm reading. You know what? I'm just going to go with the one that's impacting me most right now. Actually, it's actually Jimmy Rex's book. I love Jimmy, such an incredible guy. He wrote the book Be One, and this is when I first read the title, I was like, Be One what? I don't understand. But he's written this book on don't look for good men, just be one. So I'm 30 pages in right now. I'm loving the storytelling. I'm loving learning from him. But this is what happened. He was telling the story about when he was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And on the hike, there was a gentleman with one leg. And he was hiking Mount Kilimanjaro, bleeding on his hands, just hiking and hiking and hiking. And at one point, I'll tell a bit from the story. There was a military veteran who at base camp said, okay, which one of you isn't making it? I bet it's Jimmy. And Jimmy was like, no, you better drag my dead ass off this mountain, because I'm going to the top come hell or high water. And he said the guy that asked who wasn't making it is the guy that actually didn't make it, the only one that didn't make it. And the guy that had one leg, his coach was also there. And his coach said the one-legged gentleman was at the end of his rope. He had within the last year had a an act of suicide that he was about to execute. And he said, if this guy doesn't make it to the top, I don't know if he's going to have anything else to live for. And so with the help of his brothers, they got the one-legged man to the top. And that story hit me so hard that it made me text one of my clients the next day. And this one of my clients, and this is why the book has impacted me so much. It made me realize how I was acting without all of my power with this client of mine. And I decided to say, screw it. I'm calling him on the carpet. I'm done playing nice. I don't care if he leaves my community. I have to say this because I'm his mentor. He's paid me to be his mentor. I have that level, at least, of stewardship. If I didn't have that level of stewardship, it wouldn't be my place, but I do. So I called him and I said, I don't know if you've decided that you're going to lose weight. He'd been working on a weight loss goal for 6 months with me and hadn't made any progress. And I said, I'm really worried about you and your family. I'm really worried about what happens if you don't commit to this. I'm really worried about what happens if you continue to disprioritize this and stay inconsistent because your life is on the line. And I cannot get you to the top of the mountain if you don't want to go. All I need for you is to tell me that you want to go. And dude, you can ride on the coattails of my faith, and I will carry your ass up there if I need to. But I don't know if you want to go there yet. So tell me, what's it going to be? And that was when you asked, that's a long answer to your question. But the book, I love reading. I devour books, listen to them like crazy. And if I were to not take anything else from that book, it would still be worthwhile because it was the paragraph that pushed me to be a better coach for my students.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And occasionally, like we were talking about it, sometimes we need the 2x4 of reality.
I think I was the 2x4 now that you say that.
I heard somebody say that years ago. I don't even remember who it was. And I just love that saying, the 2x4 of reality. But we've all been in that moment where, and fear is a powerful drug. And we'll come up with an excuse in the face of the planet to not do something, Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I truly, truly appreciate it. You're an awesome human being, and I'm looking forward to the really cool stuff that we can do in the future.
Big time, bro. It's going to be awesome. And I can't wait to have you on my podcast. We'll set it up and get it scheduled.
Absolutely. That'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Marianne and to get a free copy of her book, The Ultimate Signature Presentation Blueprint, check out the link in the description.